In the shadowed corridors of South America's political history, few names evoke as much controversy, fascination, and outrage as Alberto Fujimori. To some, he was the strongman who saved Peru from economic collapse and crushed a brutal insurgency. To others, he was a dictator who sanctioned death squads, oversaw rampant corruption, and fled his nation when the walls of justice closed in. His story is not just one of power, but of how power, when unchecked, can warp a democracy into a stage 4 personal ambition and criminal enterprise. The early 1990s were years of turmoil in Peru. The nation faced triple crises. Hyperinflation spiraled out of control. The Shining Path and MRTA guerrilla groups carried out bloody insurgencies, and the political elite had lost all credibility. Into this vacuum stepped Alberto Fujimori, a little-known university professor of Japanese descent, nicknamed El Chino by supporters. He campaigned as an outsider, a man untouched by the corrupt political class. His slogan, honesty, technology, and work. Against all odds, Fujimori defeated Nobel laureate Mario Vargas Llosa in the 1990 presidential elections. It was a shock victory, signaling Peruvians' desperation for change. Fujimori promised pragmatic solutions: stabilize the economy, restore order, and fight terrorism. For a time, he seemed to deliver. Fujimori's presidency quickly took on the mantle of a wartime command. The Shining Path, led by Abimael Guzman, had unleashed bombings, assassinations, and massacres across the country. By 1990, their campaign of terror had claimed tens of thousands of lives. Fujimori authorized the military and intelligence services to wage an all-out war. But this was not a conventional fight. Under the direction of his shadowy intelligence chief, Vladimiro Montesinos, Peru's state forces began a campaign of extrajudicial killings, forced disappearances, and massacres. One of the most infamous units was the Colina Group, a death squad tied directly to the presidency. In 1991, they carried out the Barrios Altos massacre, killing 15 civilians, including an 8-year-old child at a barbecue, mistaking them for guerrillas. A year later, 9 students and a professor were abducted from La Cuntuta University, never to be seen again. Both atrocities were later traced to the Colina Group. Fujimori's government denied responsibility, framing these events as collateral damage in a just war. Yet behind the scenes, evidence mounted that these killings were not accidents, but deliberate state policy. Fujimori himself approved the Colina Group's budget and covered up their crimes. This was the Dirty War, a war where the state became indistinguishable from the terrorists it claimed to destroy. In 1992, Fujimori stunned the world with his Orogop self-coup. Dissatisfied with congressional resistance, he dissolved the legislature, suspended the constitution, and took full control of the government with military backing. Tanks rolled through Lima streets. For many Peruvians weary of chaos, the coup was welcomed. Order seemed preferable to democracy. For others, it marked the death of Peru's fragile institutions. From that moment, Fujimori ruled as both president and strongman. The judiciary was purged, the media silenced, and Montesinos expanded his intelligence empire. Fujimori's image as the pragmatic savior remained strong, internationally praised by the United States for his effectiveness against insurgents and narco-traffickers. But inside Peru, democracy had been replaced by authoritarianism cloaked in stability. Inigo Joar, Guzman, the leader of Shining Path, was captured in a daring intelligence raid. This was Fujimori's crowning achievement, celebrated worldwide. Terrorist attacks declined dramatically, and by the mid-1990s, insurgent forces were nearly destroyed. Fujimori basked in glory, presenting himself as the man who defeated terror. His approval ratings soared, yet victory came at a cost. Human rights organizations documented widespread torture, mass detentions, and killings committed in the name of counterterrorism. Fujimori's success masked the reality. Peru's democracy had been dismantled, its freedoms traded for security. No figure looms larger in the Fujimori saga than Vladimiro Montesinos, his spymaster and chief advisor. Montesinos was a master manipulator, weaving a vast network of bribery and blackmail. Judges, politicians, journalists, military officers all were bought and controlled with cash from the state's coffers. The system was so pervasive that it became known as Fujimorismo, a regime built not just on fear, but on corruption. Montesinos videotaped many of these transactions, the infamous Vladivideos. They showed politicians stuffing cash into briefcases, media moguls accepting payoffs, and congressmen swearing loyalty in exchange for bribes. These tapes would later become Fujimori's undoing. Another scandal emerged in the late 1990s. The mass sterilization program. Under Fujimori's family planning initiative, over 270,000 women, mostly poor and indigenous, were sterilized, many without consent. Testimonies revealed women lured into clinics with promises of food or medical care, only to wake up from anesthesia having undergone irreversible procedures. The government framed this as a fight against poverty, but human rights groups denounced it as a crime against humanity. For countless women, the scars, physical and emotional, never healed. By 2000, Fujimori sought a controversial third term, bending constitutional limits. The election was marred by fraud, intimidation, and manipulation. Despite winning, his legitimacy crumbled. Then came the bombshell. A Vladivideo surfaced, showing Montesinos bribing a congressman. The footage ignited a firestorm. Protests erupted, allies defected, and international pressure mounted. Sensing his regime's collapse, Fujimori fled to Japan in November 2000, under the guise of attending an international summit. From Tokyo, he faxed his resignation to the Peruvian Congress. But Congress rejected it, instead voting to remove him for moral incapacity. The once celebrated president was now a fugitive. In exile, Fujimori lived comfortably in Japan, shielded by his dual citizenship. For years, he plotted a political comeback, even launching a failed attempt to run for the Japanese parliament. But in 2005, he made a fateful mistake, traveling to Chile. There, authorities arrested him at Peru's request. After a lengthy legal battle, Chile extradited Fujimori in 2007 to face justice in Peru. In 2009, after a landmark trial, Fujimori was convicted of human rights abuses and corruption. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison for authorizing the Barrios Altos and La Contuta massacres, kidnappings, and other crimes. The court ruled that Fujimori bore direct criminal responsibility for the actions of the Kalina group. It was a historic verdict. The first time a democratically elected head of state had been tried and convicted in his own country for human rights violations. Even behind bars, Fujimori remained a polarizing figure. Some Peruvians continued to see him as a hero who saved the nation from terrorism and economic collapse. Others viewed him as a criminal who corrupted democracy and destroyed lives. His children, Keiko and Kenshi Fujimori, carried on his political legacy, with Keiko becoming a major political contender in multiple presidential elections. Fujimorismo endures as both a political movement and a national scar. The story of Alberto Fujimori is a cautionary tale of democracy sacrificed at the altar of security, of how fear can justify brutality, and of how absolute power breeds absolute corruption. His rise showed the desperation of a people in crisis. His rule showed how easily institutions can fall, and his downfall proved that even the most powerful cannot escape accountability forever. Dirty wars, dirty money, and conviction. This is the legacy of Alberto Fujimori, a man who promised salvation, delivered blood and shadows, and ultimately became a prisoner of his own making.